Today I want to tell you about a lot of information about the Titanic, especially the heroes of the Titanic. And there were quite a few. So we'll get into those. I want to tell you I do have my books available in the liquor store and also in Kindle form and Audible at Amazon. This is my website, and I'm having a special offer for everyone attending today that I want to gift you a free Audible book. You sign up there at my website, then I'll have your email. You send me an email telling me the Audible book that you want, and I'll send it to you to your inbox. That's an MP4 versus, it's not a CD, it'll come into your inbox in your email. The theme of my book, Titanic 1912, is to explore the news stories of the era, of the days and the weeks after the Titanic went down, and to tell you what they got right, what they got wrong. And here's the intro to my Audible book.
Scene one of the lead-ins to the sinking of the Titanic has to be that fateful room where telegraph operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride worked at processing the huge backlog of messages which came into the Titanic on April 14, 1912. Included in the volume of messages were important weather reports that came from other ships and that the two had to relay on to Cape Race, Newfoundland. Those messages dealt with ice fields in the path of the Titanic. While some report that the operator simply sent the messages on to Cape Race, other witnesses were quoted in news reports, as well as in Logan Marshall's survivor accounts, that Captain Smith received such reports and simply stuffed them in his pocket. But the biggest blunders of the first night of the reporting of the Titanic sinking were that all were saved and that the ship was under tow to Halifax. While it's understandable how the confused message mixed up the story of the survivors, it's clear that inventive reporting concocted the story that the ship was under tow. The Titanic arrived on the sea bottom at about 2:30 a.m. Monday, April 15th, about the same time that many newspapers around the world were telling their readers that the crippled ship was slowly proceeding towards Halifax, Nova Scotia.
One of the first heroes that I want to talk to you about, he actually gets very little press, and he's Rigel, the hero dog of the Titanic. He was a Newfoundland. I know that we have a lot of Canadians on board. You're well familiar with the breed. And that dog was it's a breed that's about 100 to 130 pounds. Some have mixed colors. They have 2 layers of fur. They like to slobber, they're lovable, and they take over your house. And they have webbed feet like a duck. Incredible. And they really are instrumental in helping fishermen in icy waters. They go into icy waters, they don't care, it doesn't bother them. The Rigel belonged to Mr. Murdoch, who was the first officer of the Titanic. When the ship struck the iceberg, when it went down, it didn't work out real good for a lot of people. And I always ask kids at the Titanic Museum, when I'm telling them the story, if you had a big black dog full of fleas, would you let that dog in your lifeboat? The kids always say no. It's an incredible little hero. Well, no one let Rigel in their lifeboat. They were out in the water for about 3 hours before the rescue ship, the Carpathia, came along and began retrieving lifeboats full of people. The captain, he did everything right as he raced towards the location sent out by the wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, on the Titanic. He doubled his lookouts. He had his crew put on large vats of coffee, soup, hot chocolate, and he diverted the steam from the ship's engines from heating the cabins to all for propelling the ship faster. So he made his maximum speed. He did it as safely as he could. He wrote later that they dodged a lot of icebergs on the way there. So they got there and they thought they had picked up all of the people from the lifeboats. And the captain walked up on the bow of a ship and looked down the starboard side. That would be the front right side of the ship. And he kept hearing this barking of a big dog. Well, they'd already retrieved about 5 little dogs from, the ladies' lap dogs that people had with them in their lifeboats. But this didn't make any sense to him. Why would there still be a big dog if they'd already retrieved all the lifeboats? Well, he looked down in the very front of the bow of the ship. There was one more lifeboat that they didn't know was there. It actually had about 70 people in it. So that dog was the voice of the people. Why weren't they screaming and yelling? Because their voices were pain. Hear a mournful, broken spirit prostrate at thy feet complain. Many are my foes and mighty, strength to conquer I have none. Nothing can uphold my goings but thy blessed self alone. And then hold me up in mighty waters and keep my eyes on things above. Those were one of the thoughts and minds and prayers of those who were slowly freezing to death in the water. This is a view of the Titanic as it left Queenstown in Ireland. There was a newspaper coverage of the Titanic was instant. The first reports of the ship sinking went out to Cape Race, were relayed on to both sides of the Atlantic. In the Wanamaker department store in New York was a young fellow about 19, 20 years old, and he was the first wireless operator to get the news of the sinking, which immediately began going to newspapers. And the first stories went out, a lot of confusion, a lot of misreporting, and in some instances, news reports were simply concocted. But yet that young fellow's name was David Sarnoff, and he later went on to found the NBC radio and television networks. This is a tribute that appeared in the newspaper The Spear of London, and this came up 5 days later. They had pictures of the crew, of some of the important and wealthy people. The artist's conception here in this one, they show I'll go back to it, pardon me. They show a cutaway. This is 5 days later. This is the art available and the talent available on the ship to save everyone? No. But the lifeboats they had weren't filled. There's a reason for that. And we know that there weren't any hope of towing it to Halifax. Did all the men behave gallantly while the women and children boarded lifeboats? Many did. Most did. Some famously did not. So again, the speed record, the Cunard liners had that. At least 6 warnings of ice ahead. The lifeboats could have held 920 people. As a result, there were about 712 that rescued. 705 made it ashore. 6 died on the way to New York on the Carpathia and were buried at sea. So, how do you separate fact from fiction? Well, first, look for evidence. First-hand witness testimony. There were 705 survivors, and they told their stories when they got to shore. There was a fleet of newspaper reporters waiting for them, and they talked freely, and those first reports weren't really that embellished yet. After a few weeks and a couple of months and so forth, things maybe got out of hand. Well, you have that direct evidence. 5 days after the ship sank, the United States Senate Commerce Committee got on a train and went to New York and started holding hearings as to why it happened. You imagine the United States Senate, any committee doing anything within 5 days? Recently, they didn't even pass a budget for 5 years. So that was quite something for them to do that. 3 months later, the British Board of Trade, they held hearings into it. Other evidence, at the bottom of the ocean with a ship. It may have taken almost 100 years to get to it, but the evidence there spoke of the conflict between the reports of the ship just going straight down or breaking in two sections and then sinking. And it was have actually made it into New York. There were about 6 or 7 more that died on the way. This is really kind of frightening. They had drain holes in these lifeboats on the top deck, and they had plugs for the holes. Well, they never thought they were going to need to use these things, these lifeboats. They took the plugs out. So when they launched them and they put these women in them, women are going, we're going to sink. They were forced to stick their hands in that hole to keep the water out, to keep from sinking. Oh, what a night. So 200 more people could have survived. There's talks about brittle steel. They want to blame the rivets. There were 3 million rivets on the ship. And as I believe, the blame should go squarely towards both the captain and the fire. They switched to welding after this disaster. And they said, we're going to freeze to death. Why do we have to row? She says, you're going to row to stay warm. That will keep you warm. You're going to row to stay alive. And then she assigned them 2 to an oar, 1 to hold it up and 1 to pull it. And everybody in that lifeboat survived. Hypothermia at that point was their biggest enemy. So she took care of the coward, and she kept the ladies working.